What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And it is officially 2024, and the NFL season is almost officially over. We got 1 week of games left where some teams are still in it, some teams are not. And for those of you not familiar exactly with this channel, I did a 2023 deep dive series where I predicted player performance, records, all that good stuff. And I got a couple of things really right with this big brain I got up here, and I got a couple things wrong, and that's what we're going to be reviewing here today. Going to be patting myself on the back and holding myself accountable all at the same time. But make sure to hit the like, comment, and subscribe before we get started so you don't miss any of my cold takes or my hot takes that I put out on this channel throughout the year. And speaking of hot takes, we're going to start with the one thing that I got right, my proudest moment of my deep dive series, my proudest moment of my any prediction that I made, and that was my prediction of the Carolina Panthers being deuce, specifically their coaching staff. See, I ranked their coaching staff as a bottom 5 staff, and boy, did Carolina Panther fans not like that. They used terms like, our coaching staff is Avengers assembled. It is one of the best coaching staffs on paper that you could find. Our offense coordinator is great. Our positional coaches are amazing. You are showing your lack of knowledge by discounting what our coaching staff is capable of. And turns out, as a lot of you know, Frank Reich was the first head coach fired this year. Fired before Josh McDaniels was. Fired in, I think it was week 10. One of the fastest coaches firings in NFL history. And to their credit, when I went back into the comment section of that video and called them out with the question marks and, I don't seem to be so, they took accountability for it, a lot of them. So kudos to you guys out there. I hope you did subscribe as sort of like a make good on insulting me for apparently not being knowledgeable enough. And then there was the other thing with their offensive line where I was like, their offensive line's kind of mid, probably below average. And I was told how ridiculous that was as well. And boy, oh boy, did the Carolina Panthers ever show that their offensive line could use some improvement. I also said that they were going to lack in the weapons department, which ended up being true as well. It was their ultimate downfall. There was no development in Bryce Young, though I'm still a believer in Bryce Young. Yeah, I'm still a believer in Bryce Young. I gotta be a believer in Bryce Young, don't I? Because he just had no chance whatsoever. Maybe they'll add some weapons in the offseason. It's gonna be an interesting who they hire as the head coach to really turn this around, to really lure free agents in there. But I do believe in Bryce Young in year 2. Moving on to something I did get wrong, speaking of rookie quarterbacks, specifically CJ Stroud. Now, I said CJ Stroud had the biggest bust potential of the top 3 quarterbacks taken. Oops. See, I'm all nervous. I'm all nervous about admitting that I was wrong. But CJ Stroud, I also said, would benefit from the system that was being brought over by DeMeco Ryans with that Shanahan-style offense, and he did. But I'm not going to just give him the whole system. That guy was extending plays. He was making big-time throws in big-time situations all year as a rookie. Really looked like he was at veteran level poise, made guys around him better too. Nico Collins, who was a literal nobody before, has played like a wide receiver 1. Tank Dell, the rookie, before he got injured, looked great out there. He just did an amazing job. He really did an amazing job. And I'll give credit to the coaching staff, but you got to give credit to CJ Stroud as well, who's looking like he's going to be, at the very least, an upper tier quarterback for most of his NFL career. It's just a shame that DeMeco Ryans, who I think deserves a lot of credit for rebuilding that culture so incredibly quickly, with the way that they drafted, with the way they addressed certain positions in free agency, bringing in certain veterans and not necessarily blowing their brains out at the bank, so that they can maybe do that this year where players are going to be a little bit more inclined to want to play for this team. I think it was a great strategy, but it is unfortunate that DeMeco Ryans is going to be overshadowed and likely won't win Coach of the Year, because we're going to go to another thing I got wrong. Yep, we're doing 2 wrongs in a row. The Cleveland Browns. Now, I thought Cleveland was going to finish at the bottom of the division. I just felt that the Steelers were a team that was a little bit more consistent. And the Steelers did a great job this year. I think the division as a whole, with Joe Burrow being out, it kind of did help the Cleveland Browns out. But the significance of how well that coaching staff did with Kevin Stefanski and Jim Schwartz, I mean, it can't be can't be argued how great that they were, and though they were not ranked as a top 10 coaching staff for me in this 2023 Deep Dive Series, in 2024, they most certainly will, because what an amazing performance. They win at least 11 games. It could be 12 by the time the season is over. There's still one game left. And they're in the playoffs with 4 quarterbacks being used, with Nick Chubb being out for most of the year. Just an amazingly great coaching performance by Kevin Stefanski. I think he really solidified himself as one of the top tier coaches. And I think now that the Cleveland Browns, once they get healthy, and if they can navigate through some little salary cap issues here, and if they draft well, they could be a team that competes for the AFC in general. I don't know that the Deshaun Watson contract is something that's going to benefit them in the long term. I think they showed that maybe you can just install somebody to run the system a certain way and have a lot of success and maybe spend the money elsewhere. But they are locked up with Deshaun Watson in that sense. But man, just Kevin Stefanski, I think, is going to be the coach of the year. I think it's pretty much locked in at this point, which is a shame for the one thing that I did get right, and that is the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell did the near impossible, which is take a Detroit team that had high expectations coming into the season and to live up to them. The expectation for Detroit was they're going to win the division. I believe they were the odds-on favorites coming into the year, not by much. The Minnesota Vikings still had an outside shot and to the odds makers, but it was looked at as this is Detroit's year to get over the hump and become one of the top teams in the NFC, especially because of the weaknesses in the NFC. And barring a horrific call against the Cowboys, they could be a 12-win team minimum this year. They could still get to 12 wins, but they should probably be 12-4 going into Week 18. And it was just all some really solid performances by Jared Goff. Great usage of Jahmyr Gibbs throughout the year. They had secondary wide receivers really step up well outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown throughout the year. You know, Josh Reynolds did really well. Jameson Williams had some good performances. They had Sam Laporta, who really stepped up. He was playing like one of the best tight ends in the league from the onset as a rookie, which is fantastic. Some of the other things I felt that they were going to struggle with that they kind of did was on the defensive side of the ball. I still think that they need some cornerback help out there to help with that pass defense and keep the scores low and help out that pass rush. Aiden Hutchinson quietly had a really good year. He didn't really have like the quote sexy stats. He wasn't getting into, I don't think he's gotten into double-digit sacks this year, but he's gotten a lot of pressures. He had a lot of really good performances, and eventually those pressures are going to turn into sacks. It's just a matter of time. You almost want to measure somebody based upon all the pressure they're putting on the quarterback, because eventually that will convert. Sack numbers can be almost misleading at times for certain players who could have just a really high success rate, because that's just the way it ended up working out for them. But I think the lack of overall help that Aiden Hutchinson had this year is why the sacks and the pressures didn't really match up in terms of a high level sack rate. And I do expect that to change in the offseason. I think players are going to really want to be part of this team, part of this culture. I think they could use maybe a first-round pick on an edge rusher, though I want them to be corner so bad. I think that if they go and they invest in a good corner this year, it'll make the world of a difference. I think if they bring back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who didn't really even play at all this year for them, I think that could make a huge level of difference for their defense as well. But overall, I had Detroit winning the division. I had Detroit finishing as a top 10 team in the NFL, and I think that they are. I have them finishing, I believe, as the number 10 team in the league. And I think that is a pretty solid prediction. Staying inside their division, the Chicago Bears. I'm going to say I got that right. They currently are sitting on 7 wins this year, and I had them being about an 8-win team and doing pretty much exactly what they did this year, which is being like a sneaky good trap game almost every week. The overall talent level, I doubted, and I still do to a degree, especially in the pass rush, and then they went out and they got Montez Sweat, which I do feel was vindication for me in that sense. They had some really good rookie play from Tyreek Stevenson. I thought that was something that I kind of expected, though I didn't maybe not expect such a great performance. I did expect him to get on the field quite a bit. And I thought that if he did, that would really elevate this team to being the team that I predicted them to be. And just the fact that they were a team that came out every week and could really be a threat to anyone. I also thought that they were a team that could easily lose to every team. And I think they showed that as well. Just with some inconsistent play. You know, Justin Fields wasn't healthy all year either. I thought he did play pretty well when he was out there for most of the time he was out there. He did have some real stinkers, which I think is expected for somebody who's not necessarily a great passer of the ball. But his playmaking ability was able to shine through. And he did improve as a passer as compared to his previous seasons. But I did also think that the Bears, if they ended up with a top pick, it was possible they could move on. And from the rumors that are coming out on this Monday morning and as of last night, New Year's Eve night, it does look like now that the Bears have locked up that number 1 pick, that it is going to be kept and used on a quarterback, Caleb Williams. That is the expectation apparently around the league, which does throw Justin Fields' future into flux. But I think that does put someone like Atlanta in play to get him. I think they're going to probably weigh the options between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Now, looking at some NFC teams that I did get wrong, we'll start with Tampa Bay. I had them as the 3rd worst team in my deep dive series, and they are in perfect position now to win the division. Baker Mayfield reestablished himself, I think, as a starter in the NFL. I think he's earned himself a couple extra $1 million over the next couple of years. I think Tampa Bay will stick with him, even if they don't make the playoffs this year. If the Saints find a way to beat the Falcons and then they somehow gaff the last game against the Carolina Panthers, who I would expect the Carolina Panthers to come out pretty hard in that game. I think people expect them to tank. They already got the last pick locked up. They're going to be guys out there that want to play for their jobs next year. So I do expect Carolina to come out pretty hard, especially after this embarrassing loss that he suffered against Jacksonville. So I don't think it's going to be as simple as this is the worst team in the league, we're walking into the playoffs. It could be a little bit of a trap, to be honest, which is hard to find in a week 18 for a team that's still looking to clinch their playoff spot. But Mike Evans really stepped up again. They got some decent play from the defense, but it was really Baker, I think, that kept them on the straight and narrow. I'm still not a big fan of their coaching staff. There is a part of me that felt that Todd Bowles should probably still be moved on from. I do think he does hold them back with his just lack of an ability as a head coach. I think as a defensive coordinator, that's really where his sweet spot is. Same thing with Dennis Allen there in New Orleans. I've sort of harped on that throughout all my mock drafts and throughout the deep dive series. But overall, really good. I think they can afford to add maybe an offensive tackle. I think they still need a wide receiver. I don't necessarily expect them to keep Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, even though they had some level of success. I would expect teams to be looking into getting Mike Evans in particular, including my New York Giants. And that's who we're going to talk about next. My New York Football Giants, who I had as a top 15 team in the league. And right out the gate, there was signs that that the honeymoon was over. We'll call it that. They are going to finish, looks like, with a top 5 pick in the draft. They just lost games that they needed to win. I did predict early in the year that they were going to struggle, that they weren't going to look like a team that was going to get to that next level. I thought that the second half of the season was really important for them, particularly the games against the Packers, the Rams, and the Saints, and they nearly were able to pull out the win against the Rams. Some questionable decisions in terms of the kicking game and time management at the end of that game cost them, which is unfortunate. Now they're probably going to go into Week 18 against the game against the Eagles and just get completely run off the field because the Eagles actually have to win that game because they're still competing for the division with the Dallas Cowboys. Evan Neal didn't get the step up that I was really expecting him to do in year 2. Daniel Jones never was really able to get it going, I think, in coordination with the offensive line woes and then the injuries that he always had. He didn't really play with Andrew Thomas, who got hurt in the first game. So it was sort of just a real bad situation early on in the year. I think as the season went on, they started to show that they could actually maybe play a bit, but then they ran into the Saints, who have like a real defense, and it just wasn't happening. Tyrod Taylor made some real bonehead plays. I thought that maybe playing Tommy DeVito for the rest of the year was a good decision, though Tyrod didn't play terrible against the Rams. He did make some really game altering mistakes, like really small ones. And then some holding penalties, which we expected the offensive line. I think John Michael Schmitz was really up and down, which you kind of expect from a rookie. I did expect him to be a little bit more consistent, though. And Saquon Barkley, I think, has, as of next week, will have played his last game as a New York Giant. Personally, if I was the GM, I would move on from that. He wasn't playing like a top back, and I think you could get what he was giving and what he's going to continue to give throughout the rest of his career from maybe like some sort of committee thing, or just trying to hit on like an early day 3 back. I think there's really good case to be made for this upcoming running back class, that though there's not really a first round talent, not even maybe really a second round talent, there's a huge cluster of running backs who could all be really great value picks in the 3rd round. I expect the Giants to maybe be part of that. Just a disaster. They need a top wide receiver. They just didn't have that throughout the year. Jalen Hyatt really started to come on at the end. Wan'Dale Robinson really did a great job at the end of the year. So they got some, but they just need a true number one, like a true all-purpose wide receiver, like a Mike Evans, maybe like a Stephon Diggs. But how much is that going to cost them? They do have 2 second-round picks. Maybe they send those 2 second-round picks to Buffalo for Stephon Diggs. I don't know, but something needs to be done there. I think that they might be slightly out of reach of a quarterback, because I don't expect, if the rumors about the Bears are true, they're taking Caleb Williams, and I don't expect Washington or the Patriots to come off of the number 2 pick in the draft to not take Drake May. So then it could become a reach situation. They're talking about Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. He's still, just because he won the Heisman, I don't necessarily see him as being a top 5 pick. I think that someone like Minnesota in the middle of the 1st round will take him, just because they are going to be so desperate for a quarterback. But it's going to be, I think it's got to be another year of Daniel Jones. I think you kind of just burn the tape on this one, and you got $40 million invested in him for 1 more year. Why not just do it? Maybe try to trade back in the draft, maybe pick up an extra 1st round pick next year, and then maybe use that to try and get a quarterback if Daniel Jones doesn't work out the way that you're hoping. But speaking of teams that need quarterbacks, another thing that I got right, I'll say that, is the Washington Commanders. I had them as the 2nd worst team in the NFL, and currently they sit with the 2nd overall pick. They can't get to number 1, so if they lose to the Cowboys, which is very likely, they will lock up that number 2 pick, and it'll be the perfect prediction for me. And I do expect them, if they are sitting there with new ownership, new coaching staff, that pick is going to be Drake May, the North Carolina quarterback. Barring Chicago wanting to move out of number 1, maybe Washington moves up from 2 to 1 to take Caleb Williams, just to guarantee that they get the top quarterback in the draft. I could see that maybe being a possibility, but I do expect the Bears, the rumors right now are the Bears are going to stay at 1 and take a quarterback. So it's going to be Drake May, brand new coaching staff there in Washington with that new ownership group. I think they're going to be looking to make really big time moves, particularly with the coaching staff, get something exciting going on there. Nothing really exciting about Ron Rivera. They need to improve the offensive line, but they do have some good draft capital, particularly with 2 second-round picks now and 2 third-round picks to add to that team. I think they might add another second-round pick, like in the later end of the 2nd round, because I'm not sure Jonathan Allen is going to stick around either, and I could see a team throwing a late 2nd-round pick. Maybe they miss out on Johnny Newton, and they want to grab a defensive tackle because they're not really like a top-tier defensive tackle. Leonard Taylor might be a guy out of the University of Miami, but I think that they might value Johnny Newton like that middle of the 1st round, early 20s, and then have a team that maybe was targeting him, missing out, calling up Washington, being like, hey, here's a 2nd-round pick, pick 50-something, give us Jonathan Allen. I think they'd be really open to doing that as well and just continue to rebuild their team. I think they'll shift a lot of the focus to the offensive side of the ball and just get a high-quality defensive coordinator. But I did expect Sam Howell not to be all that great. I kind of expect their offensive line to kind of stink. I thought their defense was going to struggle a lot more than people thought, though I did value their front four. They just ended up trading them all away at the trade deadline, Sweat and Chase Young. So that really took a dive there at the end. But KJ Henry had some good moments there, and I did expect him to do that when I was talking about him being the replacement for Chase Young. I just didn't expect them to need a replacement for Montez Sweat as well. So I do expect that to be something they address in the second round. I could even see them maybe trading up back into the first round on the back end if one of these edge rushers starts to tumble a little bit, because there are some really good edge rushers. I think you could get somewhere between 5 of them going in the first round, maybe even a little bit more depending on how they perform at the NFL Combine and at their pro days. But that's the bottom teams. Now let's talk about the top teams in the league right now. And what I got wrong was the Baltimore Ravens. I had them finishing outside the top 10, and they are looking like they might be the number 1 seed in the entire league. They're the most consistently good team in the hardest conference in the league, the AFC. In the hardest division probably in the AFC North. And unlike the Dolphins, who had some really good games, the Baltimore Ravens were so consistently good. They just put 56 on the Dolphins just this week. I think it showed that there might be a separation in tier, and this is their conference to lose. Lamar Jackson had MVP caliber season, though I don't expect him to win it. Their defense was amazing. They were like number 1 in turnovers, number 1 in yards. They were number 1 in a lot of different defensive categories this year. And barring some terrible performance against the Steelers on Saturday, they're going to finish top 2, top 3 in a lot of the major defensive statistical categories, which is just, all credit to the coaching staff for making sure that they kept this team together, especially with the Lamar Jackson controversy that happened in the offseason. And credit to Lamar for coming in and not resting on his laurels and proving that he was right for demanding the type of money that he demanded in the last offseason, and really stuck to his guns, got the contract he wanted, then came out and led this team to absolute greatness. And they were kind of like hovering under the radar as a great team for most of the year, because so much focus was on Tua and Tyreek. So much focus was on Mahomes and Kelsey and Taylor Swift. So much focus was on, oh my God, Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Joe Burrow got hurt. Oh my God, the Houston Texans are really surprising us. Oh my God, the Chargers are letting down yet again. And they just sort of rode the wave, stayed very consistent, and it looks like it's their conference to lose. They could easily be the team to go to the Super Bowl, and they really look like the only team that's like considered to be a top team that is going to be the hardest out. Like the Dolphins, you're just like, they could lose to anyone. The Bills could lose to anyone. The Browns, you don't really know like what they're going to look like. Despite really great coaching performance, like I said earlier. The Chiefs, what is going on there? How much of a distraction is this Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing actually? Because look at how much they've suffered. Look how much Travis Kelce has been inconsistent this year. Maybe he should spend less time flying to Brazil and more time in the film room. That's just me. But I did get the Baltimore Ravens wrong. But the top team that I did get right, and this is the final one, the San Francisco 49ers. I hit the microphone again. I'm so excited about how good I am at this. My God, you think I wasn't doing this for long enough. But the 49ers, I had them as my number 1 team in the entire league. And that seems to be, outside of maybe competing with Baltimore, that looks to be the case. I do think that I'm going to hold on them being my Super Bowl champions. Brock Purdy, I think, really outperformed what people expected of him. I don't think people expected him to break the 49ers passing yards record. Brandon Ayuk really stepped up this year. He really established himself as a wide receiver 1, which is really difficult to do when you got a Deebo Samuel on that team. George Kittle did his part. Christian McCaffrey, what an epic season for him. If it wasn't a quarterback award, I would have him as the MVP, but it's going to be a quarterback award, so I'm looking at it being between Purdy, Lamar Jackson. I would say Dak Prescott gets a little bit of talk in there, but maybe Lamar sort of runs away with this because of that performance against the Dolphins, the 5 touchdowns. But I think Purdy's going to be right up there, maybe to get the second most votes behind Lamar Jackson. Kyle Shanahan, one of the best coaches in the league, probably the best coach in the league, gets the most out of all of his players. They had some injuries there for a bit where everyone was out. They didn't look all that great, but I mean, how are you going to lose so many of your top guys and still look great? I think that's a losing proposition for a lot of teams, especially when it mixes in with the offensive line and all that. You lose your best offensive lineman, you sort of lose your best receiver, one of your best receivers, you lose your tight end, you're losing guys on the defense. I think that they did a good job of staying the course and then getting right back on track once all those guys returned. So my prediction is the 49ers and the Ravens. Got the Ravens wrong, got the 49ers right. Now, that's it. I gave you 5 of each. I'm sure there's a bunch of more things in the details that I got right and wrong in my last deep dive series. It was a fun series to do, and looking back on it, I feel smart and dumb all at the same time. But leave in the comment section below your predictions and how they went. Were you a Panthers fan and did you completely screw that up? Or were you a Ravens fan and you completely called it right? But I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below what your favorite hot take of the preseason was and how that then worked out in reality. And like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys with the next video next time.